New questions surrounding the incident report that officers turned in after Tyree Nichols was beaten. The report obtained by ABC News tells the story of an irate suspect. The officer writing, detectives gave verbal commands to stop resisting, and then the suspect, Tyree Nichols, grabbed for Detective Martin's gun.
This is bullshit!
Some bullshit.
The investigation thus far resulting in another 2 officers being relieved of duty, including White Officer Preston Hemphill, seen on his body camera footage deploying his taser at Nichols. Hemphill has not been charged. Nichols' family questioning why Hemphill wasn't identified until now, saying it certainly begs the question why the white officer involved in this brutal attack was shielded and protected from the public eye.
That's bullshit.
That's bullshit.
This is some bullshit, America. This is damn ridiculous. This officer should have been fired along with the other 5, and he should be up for some type of charge also because he deployed a taser on Tyree Nichols, and the initial stop wasn't even warranted for them to snatch him out the car, tase him, and do anything else to him. So he is a slithering snake. And I hate snakish ass people. And the Memphis Police Department, y'all know that his ass need to be fired too. This is ridiculous that you're going to let him, cruise through, slither. Snakes are slithery. They quiet, sneaky, bite you when you're not looking, that kind of shit. So I guess they want to use the black police officers as an example and let his ass get off with, suspended without pay, relieved of duty, whatever. Are you even relieved of duty without pay? Or are you getting paid while you're relieved from duty? No, your ass need to be fired because you were a part of the initial stop. You deployed a taser on Tyree Nichols for no reason whatsoever, because he should not have been treated that way from the initial stopping. Get yourself together with this bullshit. This is some bullshit, America.
This is total bullshit.
Jesus.
Welcome to Straddled Events. On this channel, we bring you the truth. Sometimes the truth is quite ugly, unbearable, and you just don't want to deal with it. But on this channel, you're gonna get it anyway. You are straddled the fence of good versus evil, right versus wrong. And on this channel, we're gonna tell you to do better. Please like, dislike, subscribe, and share the videos. Now let's go.
Tyree Nichols' death investigation. The police report from the night officers stopped and beat Nichols details a glaringly different account from what the police video shows.
Yeah, the questions over police transparency come as the family prepares to say their final goodbyes. ABC's Morgan Norwood joins us live. She's got more on the fallout as calls for police reform grow louder. Morgan.
Yeah, Joel, Amber, that fallout continues while authorities investigate whether more people should be charged in the beating of Tyree Nichols. The police report turned in hours after that, now being called into question. New questions surrounding the incident report that officers turned in after Tyree Nichols was beaten. The report obtained by ABC News tells the story of an irate suspect. The officer writing, detectives gave verbal commands to stop resisting, and then the suspect, Tyree Nichols, grabbed for Detective Martin's gun. But the video released last Friday doesn't show Nichols ever reaching for an officer's gun.
Put your hands behind your back, quick. Okay, stop.
The DA promising a thorough investigation.
We're just looking at everybody, even people that were filing reports afterwards. We're making sure that we have done a comprehensive investigation.
And the investigation thus far resulting in another 2 officers being relieved of duty, including White Officer Preston Hemphill, seen on his body camera footage deploying his taser at Nichols. Hemphill has not been charged. Nichols' family questioning why Hemphill wasn't identified until now, saying it certainly begs the question why the white officer involved in this brutal attack was shielded and protected from the public eye, and to date, from sufficient discipline and accountability. Hemphill's attorney says he is cooperating with the investigation. Memphis police telling ABC News it is protocol to immediately release names of officers fired, not relieve relieved of duty. A total of 7 officers involved in Nichols' death have been relieved of duty, including 5 who have been fired and charged with murder. And 3 from the Memphis Fire Department have also been fired. As Tyre Nichols' family prepares to say their final goodbyes, renewed calls for police reform. President Biden saying it's time.
Do you still think George Floyd Act is the most reasonable legislation to get through a divided Congress?
I think we should do it right now.
And the Congressional Black Caucus is set to visit the White House on Thursday to discuss that police reform legislation. White House officials, though, will travel to Memphis for Tyre Nichols' funeral. Live in New York, I'm Morgan Norwood, ABC 11 Eyewitness News. Guys.
And Morgan, before you go, we know more officers have been relieved of duty. We heard that distinction in your piece between what fired means and what relieved of duty and what the policy is there. But here's the question. Do we expect more charges to come down?
You know, look, Joel, we heard the district attorney saying that they're looking into everything, right? And everyone. I mean, in the wake of the conflicting police report, certainly some pressure there. I mean, police reports are supposed to reflect the facts. Bottom line here, we know the Justice Department and the State Bureau of Investigations have their own probe. And so we could see charges on multiple levels as all of these investigations continue to shake out. Joel?
And we will continue our coverage. Morgan Norwood live for us in New York. Always good to see you, Morgan, an ABC alum.
With the latest developments in the Tyre Nichols investigation.
That's right. This morning, there's more fallout following the release of that graphic video and multiple videos last week showing Nichols' brutal beating. Yesterday, the Memphis Police Department announced that 2 more officers have been relieved of duty. We know the name of one of those officers, Preston Hemphill. Hemphill's lawyer released a statement yesterday saying he was, quote, never present at the second scene, and he is cooperating with officials in this investigation. And now the Memphis Fire Department says 3 of its employees who responded to Nichols' beating have been fired following an internal investigation. Meanwhile, last night, supporters gathered for prayer in a vigil at the intersection of where Tyre was brutally beaten following a traffic stop. His stepfather spoke about the pain the family is going through.
To know that my son died right here was heartbreaking. To know that my son was calling out my wife's name, and we was not able to hear him, help him. It's devastating.
NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber joins us now from Memphis with the latest in the investigation. Good morning, Ellison. So we have to note that the 2 latest officers who were relieved of duty were not fired or charged. What do we know about Preston, and why are we just now hearing the police department say he was involved?
Right now, of these 2, we only know the name of one of them, Officer Preston Hemphill. The 7th officer relieved of duty has not yet been named, at least publicly, though that is something that Tyre Nichols' family's attorneys, as well as community activists, are calling for. In terms of this officer, the 6th officer, Preston Hemphill, we know that he was hired by Memphis Police Department in 2018. The first body camera footage that was released on Friday night, what was identified, titled as Video 1, that moment when you see the officers first going up to Tyre Nichols' car and pulling him out, that video was from Preston Hemphill's body camera footage. We know that because that's what the Memphis Police Department has said, as well as his attorney. In terms of why we're just now getting this name, when NBC News spoke to a spokesperson for the Memphis Police Department yesterday, they said that they did not publicly release his name when they released the names of the other 5 officers because he had not been fired. They said that they only released the names of those 5 who had been fired and also subsequently charged. But in the case of the 6th officer, Preston Hemphill, and now also it appears the 7th officer, they weren't fired, rather they were relieved of duty. When asked specifically by NBC News if Officer Hemphill was on paid or unpaid leave, the spokesperson did not specify, but then in subsequent statements they have acknowledged that he was present at the first scene, also that he deployed a taser. They are saying this, that investigators with the Memphis Police Department's internal affairs prioritized interviewing officers and witnesses related to the second scene first, where the most egregious aspects of the incident occurred. They say that, again, that he was not at that second scene. So that's why they're saying they've been, I guess, in some people's views, a little slower with releasing this information, with conducting this investigation. That being said, They are saying that there could be additional charges, that we should expect to see more personnel moves in the coming days. But for a lot of people, Zincle, there's great frustration that this person was not identified sooner. And I have to note that a big reason why his name really started to come up in the last 36 hours was because of local community activists, Black women who were on Twitter saying, hey, there's this name of an officer in one of the initial affidavits that's mentioned, and they say he used the taser at the scene. Why don't we know anything about this guy? Then from that, you had that group pressuring those activists, as well as some other local progressive outlets like the Tennessee Holler, that then led to the Memphis Police Department publicly identifying this individual. Tyrese Nichols, his family, their attorneys, they are calling for this officer to be immediately fired and saying that they want to see more transparency from the Memphis Police Department, and they want all audio recordings to be released immediately. Zincle.
I mean, really important details there, Ellison, especially also about the community bringing that information forward. Ellison, we also know the Memphis Fire Department fired 3 employees after an investigation into their actions that night. What were the findings of that investigation?
Yeah, so they say these employees, 2 of them EMTs, one of them the driver of the fire department vehicle that arrived on scene initially, that they showed up and they responded based on what the initial call was for, which was that a individual had been pepper sprayed. They say they relied on that initial information and details and descriptions from officers at the scene rather than doing their own patient assessment on the ground. They say that essentially they failed to follow the basic protocols of their department. It took quite a while for an ambulance to actually arrive on scene, and there have been questions about that. It was over 20 minutes afterwards. These 3 called for an ambulance, but again, they were basing all of their moves, according to the fire department, on just the initial description that this individual was pepper sprayed, when clearly what we've seen in the videos, what we know happened after, he had much more severe injuries that needed attention, and he needed help much quicker than he got it. Zincle.
Really important details in a case that has everyone's attention. Alton Barber, thank you so much.
A conversation about the death of Tyree Nichols reached Capitol Hill last night. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Dick Durbin, just one of many politicians who urged his colleagues to move on police reform, saying in part, quote, "It's time for members of the Senate to bridge our differences and pass a policing reform so that Tyree Nichols' death will not have been in vain." Ali Vitale joins us now from Washington, D.C. on this. Ali, good morning. So last night was, of course, not the first time that police reform has been discussed on the Senate floor. We've actually seen Senators Tim Scott and Cory Booker spearhead some bipartisan efforts around it in the past. First, I want to play a little bit of what Tim Scott had to say last night.
I take the issue of policing in America seriously. I want our body to see it not as an issue of Republicans versus Democrats, but as good people standing in the gap, elected to do a job.
Ali, give us some context here around what this typically looks like when it comes to a bipartisan effort here. What does it look like when we're trying to make police reform a bipartisan issue?
Well, Savannah, we know what it looked like because we watched these talks come together and then fall apart in the fall of 2021, not that long ago. And they were between Senator Tim Scott on the Republican side, who you saw on your screen just there, and Senator Cory Booker leading on the Democratic side. One of the main senators, Senator Dick Durbin, yesterday urged these lawmakers to get back to the negotiating table and see if they could find common ground, or, as Democrats in the White House want, if there's a way that they could push forward on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which had previously passed the Democratic-controlled House, but stalled out in the Senate because of those ongoing negotiations. The optimism for this actually coming to fruition, though, Savannah, is pretty low, especially because even if these two sides on the Senate did come back to the negotiating table, the House realities have changed a lot. Republicans now control that chamber, and there is not a clamoring for action there.